Hello, folks. My name is William Walker here with another episode of LGBTrek. I believe this makes episode 6 or 5.
We're gonna go with 6.
I think we're gonna go with 6.
Yeah, I think we're gonna go with 6.
All right. Hopefully, we're gonna remember. I'm gonna say 6 for now. I'm gonna say 6. And I'm not. I'll edit it out. And y'all, I'm eating fried chicken. Normally, I don't do that, but it is so good. And y'all just don't. I mean, y'all understand. It's like Southern fried chicken. You can't say no to that. Eris, welcome back. Thank you for coming back.
My pleasure.
Tell me, what are we gonna be talking about today?
Do I not get a welcome back? Like, what is this?
Yeah, I get to you in a minute. Like, I'm just kidding. Okay, no, for real. Marie, welcome back too. All parties here look so done up. I'm thinking you both look so beautiful. Like, honestly,
Why, thank you.
like,
Thank
well
you.
done.
Eris is currently like a walking advertisement for Urban Decay, so go her.
Please notice me, Urban Decay, and give me free stuff, even though I have no social media followers.
And
Alternatively,
that was a message for our sponsor.
Please come this way. We need you.
So, to tell everybody what we're actually going to cover, we're going to cover the Outcast, which is the episode in which the Next Generation actually takes on the concept of homosexuality. Effectively, what was happening? It's the 17th episode of season 5, and what had happened is they had been deluged with letters and commentary asking why Star Trek had not engaged in representation of homosexuals, and this is what they came up with.
oh God.
Eris, you want to take us into the summary?
Sure. So, at the start of the episode, the Enterprise is helping with some, problem of the week that ultimately ends up being completely inconsequential to the overall episode, as usual. The big part of it, our topic, our moral topic, is introduced in that they are looking into this weird space thing with the help of a species called the
Janai.
Janai, yes, who, as I guess, as a species, do not have gender. And over the course of the episode, what the guest star by the name of Soren and Riker develop feelings for each other
In 5 minutes.
Literally in 5 minutes.
Yeah, it is. Again, I mean, how do you look at Will Riker and not want to throw whatever bits you have at him?
I mean, the magical Riker penis apparently reworked society on Angel 1, so...
Anyway, so they develop their thing, and then Soren comes out and drops, the big problem of the episode, which is that feeling gender on her homeworld is basically viewed as a mental defect, as a mental illness. And being attracted to someone with gender is part of that mental illness. They come out as she and say they have always felt like they are a she person, and she and Riker continue their relationship, but somehow her other Janai, realize what's going on and put her before court, where they say, "Oh, you have a mental illness. We will put you through a conversion treatment so that you don't have this mental illness anymore." Riker and Worf go on a crazy little mission to try and rescue her, because who really cares about the Prime Directive when it comes to love? But they're too late, and she has already undergone treatment, and there's this tearful little moment where she says, "Oh, well, I can't go with you. I have been cured. I'm so happy. I don't feel this way anymore."
Mm.
And they leave, and the flagrant violation of the Prime Directive and attempt to sort of declare war on a neutral to friendly species is just brushed away, and the Enterprise warps off.
Yeah, that's about it. With of course the final look of the episode is on Riker, and Picard asks number one if all of his business is concluded on the planet, and Riker says yes, it is, in a very manly, distraught way.
Riker man tears.
Yes. Yes. And while so I gotta tell you, Eris's summary of this episode really doesn't. It sounds like it's workable, and it really doesn't get into how bad this episode actually is. I mean, okay, is it Turnabout Intruder? No, it's not. Is it Code of Honor? No, it is not. But it's not good.
No, okay. I went into it with that attitude. I had heard this episode's reputation. I went
have
into
notes.
It with very low expectations. And nothing in the first 10 minutes did anything to put those low expectations aside. But over the whole course of the episode, I developed an appreciation for this as a cultural artifact, we'll say. I think
I'm going to flesh that out. I'm going to need you to do that.
Okay. So,
walk me through it.
This is already getting good.
This episode, I think, is really interesting in that it uses something, the idea of non-binary genders or being non-gendered or agendered, as an allegory for, which wasn't, in 1991, wasn't really a thing that was on the general public social radar as a social issue, right? Like most people didn't. It was a sci-fi concept for most people, and they used that as an allegory to discuss something that was a very pressing social issue and something on everybody's mind: homosexuality and same-sex relationships. And I think there are actually some ways in which it was successful at that. Now, the part where
I see Anya.
Yep. My Anya has been very spicy today, and will probably make her presence known at some point in time. But the part where this episode fails, aside from just a few cringe moments that I'm sure we will flog it mercilessly over because it frankly deserves it, is that the issue they start off using as an allegory, again, being non-binary gendered or not gendered, has over the past 30 years become a social topic. And when you look at it through a current lens, yeah, it's a complete disaster. Like the treatment of non-binary people is horrendous in it. But I think that as an allegory, here we go, catbutt. I think that,
as an allegory, catbutt.
Yes, this is a non-allegorical catbutt. But I think that
I do appreciate the distinction.
I'm really here. I'm not a cat. I kind of have to applaud the episode for riding as hard on same-sex rights and recognition and acceptance as they did with this. I mean, they came out swinging pretty hard against conversion therapy, which in the early 90s was not a stance you saw of very much. They really, and just the way they portrayed the Janai in such a negative light for their social taboos against gender and showed it held that up uh, to be sort of the judgment of how, at the time, a lot of Western American society, at least, still felt about homosexuality. They brought it
They
on that
attempted
front.
to swing for the fences, but my
Yeah,
argument that I'm gonna start you here. My problem with this episode is that the entirety of the Janai are cast, and they're female actors or female identifying actors, and it's pretty clear that that's what's going on. Jonathan Frakes himself has actually come out and said that if they had had a male actor play Soren, the episode would have landed better than it did. And I think he's right. That would have been a much closer idea to what they were actually touching on.
yeah,
The other problem I have with this episode is that it's really kind of grounding. It's grounding like this idea in gender, with the assumption that you either are or you aren't, right? Because what Soren is she's expressing that she's a she, right? Like,
yeah,
um, there's no kind of awareness that non-binary is something that could exist, that
yeah.
genderless could exist, and that would be fine. Um, the episode also kind of grounds the sexual attraction, and this is we've talked about this before. We talked a little bit about this, in The Host, right? Having a preference, that's hunky dory. But what's weird about how the episode tackles this issue is that it almost tackles it as a xenophobia situation more than a fear of, and I hate to say this, but we did at one point or another, than deviant sexual orientation,
Okay.
Yeah.
right? And I think, and if you're going to make that point, and that's fine, okay. I think looking at that kind of bigotry is useful, right? I think calling it what it is, which is what this episode effectively does, and they're like, we can't really make, because one of the producers actually makes the comment that there's no way to make the Janai likable because their entire um, their entire premise is fundamentally untenable. Like, it's bigotry, and there's no real way to get around that and make them anything other than what they are. But I'm
My
kind of like, I need you to identify the type of bigotry you're looking for and nail that down before you embark on telling the story.
So first off, my wife, in the first 5 minutes, my wife came up with a way that they could have made the Janai much better. When we're being presented with this sea of very dully dressed, non-gendered individuals with awful haircuts, her immediate response was, "Who says androgynous has to be boring? Have they never heard of David Bowie?" So you certainly could have had a much more interesting portrayal if we hadn't gone for bladrogynous instead of instead
But
of
I
what they
think but I think that actually fits with, one of the other real themes, like one of the major themes of the episode, which is conformism, because the
sure
Jedi require conformism. You must be like everyone else on the planet.
sure that's fair
Um,
that's fair
and so I think that kind of, they're trying to highlight how bloody boring that kind of
yeah
conformism
yeah
is.
like what I was trying to get at in the point I came out with is that as I think that as an allegory for the treatment of homosexuality in America at the time, this episode delivered pretty well. I think if you look at it for its face value and in what it how it portrays non-gendered, non-binary people, it fails miserably. But that wasn't to me what the episode was trying to be about. That was what it was using for its metaphor. And the problem it has is that the the idea that it sort of pulled that the producers and writers pulled out of their hat to do a homosexuality episode became an actual topic 20, 30 years later, and that makes it not
Right.
hold up well.
And when the episode aired, the production team actually got a lot of flack for it because because basically the community was like, this is what you came up with, just a single sort of like very special episode of the week. Like, come on. You're in a situation where, and Rick Berman was particularly confused. Raise your hand if you're shocked. Yeah. So why there was so much pushback? Because you're right. Like, at first blush, they're swinging for the fences. They're not making any apologies for the Janai. They're not indicating that there's they can't even indicate that there's some sort of cultural validity to this.
Right.
And Soren makes that point when she says, "Look, I'm not bothering anybody. Like, I'm not engaging with anybody that doesn't identify as male. Like, I'm not swimming in your pool here. I'm not playing in your sandbox. Just, I'm not hurting anybody. Leave me alone." And obviously that's not what happened. That's not what happens. So the psychotactic therapy, you're right, obviously is a metaphorical reference to conversion therapy, which still exists.
Mm-hmm.
Fun fact.
Although it's being banned in more and more places, so we're making progress.
Thank heavens. But it does pull its punches in a couple of ways. Like I said, casting all women for the Janai undercuts what you're trying to do.
Sure.
Because it's okay to have Riker kiss someone who is very much coded female.
Mm-hmm.
From her voice, from her build, to her hands, all of it. And then there are no male coded Janai.
Right.
At all. So we're already saying that, yes, we're going to swing for the fences, but not really.
And I think really. That's very fair. Like they in terms of the message, like the message they come out and say, they went for it. In terms of what they actually did, they played it pretty safe.
I think they pretty safe. I think they did err on the side of safety. Now I get it. They're trying not to get banned in the South.
Right.
Sure. But you could have had that as an option, right? Like, you could have had something going on in the background that nobody would have noticed, because this is 1992. This isn't right now, right? Where, people are replaying and looking frame by frame by frame. That's not what's going on. And you could have done that. In fact, Roddenberry's solution to the quote unquote gay problem was to try to get two dudes to hold hands in an episode at one point. Well done.
Roddenberry was at least willing to try and put some rep out there based in without challenge, without risking getting his show canceled. We certainly would be amiss to expect that of her.
I have to be honest. I've been listening, and Marie, you know how I am when it comes to topics that I feel like I have no experience in. I do more listening than I do talking. It's a William thing, because a lot of people in the world, we don't do enough listening and too much talking on experiences that we have no remote experience or understanding of. Well, when I looked at this, I kind of identified with Riker's character a lot, because I looked at it as I could see how, like in other episodes, when you get the cis white male straight whose dick is more powerful than the hand of Midas.
Angel One. Sorry.
Yeah.
Something stuck in my throat.
But it's like, yeah, it's okay to, how do I say this without sounding stupid? It's okay to not understand something right away, because love transcends all. And he loved her. And she loved him. So much that she felt like she was herself. He didn't call her or try to conform her gender in any way because when you're under the prime directive, you kind of have to like obey it. But he didn't do that in any way. She came forward with what she wanted, and nothing on his end changed. He still loved her. He still loved her to the point that he was willing to break the prime directive just for her. And they could have found some loophole, like get her to claim asylum and all that other stuff. And like they did that other girl from the primitive planet that saw what she wasn't supposed to see. Stuff like that. Stuff like that. There's always loopholes. But it kind of opens the door to where even Picard was understanding. He's like, in Picard's position, I really think about that too, to be honest. In Picard's position, he's like, yeah, I feel like I don't have room for love on this ship, but I'm not going to deprive that of my first officer and the rest of my senior staff while we're on this 7-year journey. Like, why would I do that? It's not like they're in the middle of nowhere like Voyager, but it's like love is love, and Picard wishes he had love. There's a woman on that very ship that he loves every single day, but he can't do anything because he feels like because he's the captain, and we already crossed that path of what would happen if the captain got with someone in his crew. Like, what was the lessons? It was lessons.
It was lessons.
It was lessons. So it's just like, so if you really want to know what would have happened between Picard and Beverly. It's sad.
So I don't buy that because I think we got a much better look at what Picard and Beverly would have looked like in what was it, Conjoined?
I think, but the one with their but
when they're living in each other's heads.
Oh man, and you found out so much, but that's the whole we found out so good episode too. Like I was like finally, but. Except for the ending, but sucked. Like it was like literally another Janeway and Chakotay thing. I was like, just anyway. But that's beside the point. I looked at Riker's character because I'll admit that I wasn't always understanding, and I still have a lot more understanding to obtain. I've misgendered, I've misunderstood, I've had my initial biases. Because I feared something I didn't get, even though I'm an openly homosexual man. Even found myself attracted to many trans men and didn't realize it. But now that I know better, it's kind of one of those like things that's like more listening, less talking. You'll find out more, and I can't help but look at Riker's character and say, "Wow, you know what? I understand like what they kind of did in terms of casting was kind of fucked up, but in terms of how love goes and how appropriate he was,
I do credit where credit is due. Credit where credit is due.
Yeah.
And that point is, I mean, Riker is very supportive of Soren. Like when she comes out, like very, very supportive.
And then we find out Soren is a dude in Generations.
And also Elorian and somehow British.
Yeah, how did that happen?
Also, we had a little. While we're giving some props to Riker here, which I think I completely agree with Will. I think this is one of the better portrayals of Riker's galactic swingerness that we get. He gets a little scene with Troy where he basically sits down and says, "Hey, so I've fallen for this other person. Are we still going to be? Are we good?" And she's like, "Absolutely." And they still give each other a little peck on the lips. So I feel like this was kind of actually an interesting acknowledgement of the Troy Riker relationship, while not necessarily trying to slam, the monogamous expectation that you might have otherwise had onto it.
I think that's one of those great moments where I finally actually sort of buy the enlightened 24th century, especially since the first 10 minutes of this episode are so painful.
Yes.
We're at 25 minutes now. We can rant. It's cool. We've been good.
The first 10 minutes of this episode are god-awful.
It's terrible. It is terrible. I mean, this whole, what is it like to not have gender? What kind of question is that?
What are your pronouns? Do we call you? Calling you an it just seems rude. My right singular they has existed in the English language since I don't know
Forever.
when. Yes,
Forever. It's in Middle English. It's in Middle English. I suspect it's in Old English, but somebody leave me a comment and let me know. I literally in my notes have written the pronoun debate. Oh my god, and that's all I could do on this one.
There's absolutely no redeeming it. It's just it was lazy writing, and maybe they were trying. I see what they were trying to do about trying to introduce the audience to the concept, but it was still poorly done.
It was poorly done. And then this whole also, why would you have that kind of conversation like that if you were an enlightened spacefaring dude who has probably had more than a little bit taste of strange? Okay, it's a big universe, all kinds of things out there, right? And I am 100% that there's at least one Orion in his background. So come on, why would you
and why are they sitting here having this be this incredibly cringeworthy conversation about how sex works when presumably they can just look each other up in their database?
I was trying to remember if the Janai, if they knew enough about the Janai to do that. I mean, I didn't get the sense this was necessarily a first contact situation.
But they didn't seem like Federation members either.
They don't seem like Federation members.
I think they already. I think it's like one of those lower deck situation where first contact has already been established, and now this is like the second or third ship to come across their territory, kind of like that.
Because that's the other question I have about the applicability of the Prime Directive, because previously we've seen the Prime Directive limited to pre-warp civilizations. So I'm not getting the sense that the Janai are necessarily pre-warp civilizations, because Soren is perfectly conversant with all of the gadgets on the Magellan.
Maybe
I think I really enjoy that too, that sequence, because there was very much oh look, your little woman brain understands shuttle piloting, and I kind of wanted to die inside.
If the Janai were a pre-warp civilization, the Enterprise shouldn't have been interacting with them, period. So
right. So why does the Prime Directive? So seriously, why does the Prime Directive work here? I mean, why is it applicable?
I don't know, because I was thinking maybe this is one of those a Bajoran situation where you're kind of in between. You're in that period, in that gray area where you're crossing over and you're not quite ready. I don't know if they picked and choose.
Because that worked out for the Bajorans.
That worked out for the Bajorans after they just got done. Well, they fought to get where they were, and they asked the Federation to come. We don't know the backstory of the Janai. We don't know. We really don't know. But I do kind of see your point, Marie, where you were like, well, why apply this to this? I don't know how deep the Prime Directive goes. I need to read the book. That's what I need to do.
Well, I think that's kind of the problem, because the Prime Directive is one of those things that gets bandied about as a good idea, and
exactly.
It's kind of like Spock or even Data. They get a magic power every time the story calls for it, or an extra sibling. It's a thing apparently for Spock. The Prime Directive basically turns into whatever we need it to mean to make this story work.
Sure.
Because it's true. It's definitely true, because it seems like they were applying it towards their culture as non-binary, but not with technology. So I don't know how they could cherry pick that. But again, it's like what you said, with the Prime Directive, you can do whatever you want to do.
Because we've never effectively had it written down for us and told these are the elements of the Prime Directive. And as someone who has had nodding acquaintance with the legal field, I really want to see the subparts of this thing. I do. It would make me happy. But yeah, that conversation kind of reminded me a little bit about a weird conversation that Trip and Reed have. They're in the middle of fixing stuff. Mm-hmm. But what made sense about that conversation is it's dudes who are working together, kind of bored, and therefore they're just going to have this whole conversation about chicks I suppose. Is
I've heard that so much in my work areas, even today. Like they just got bored, and I'm just like, now
but that's not what this is. That's not what this is. Soren is not subtle.
No.
She's not subtle at all.
So Soren's the whole. Oh, Riker, would you like to take a tour of the garden? And why I enjoy exobotany.
Do you now?
Yes.
Do you now? Because Soren's got a flower she wants you to see. Which also kind of struck me as very strange, because that's a very open area to do that in.
Yeah.
By the way, like if your entire life is spent trying to avoid the Schoolhouse version of Anthem. Not that I approve of Ayn Rand at all in any way, but there's a story here. Because that kid that she talks about gets pilloried at school.
Yeah.
Pilloried. And credit to the actress. I mean, she's crying when she's telling this story. I mean, that was amazing, guys. And I gotta tell you, that was something that resonated with me a lot. A lot. Especially when I got into high school. Things were not quite that bad, but it wasn't far off.
Well, and again, this comes back to another place where, at least in terms of how the episode was trying to be an allegory for the treatment of gay people in America at the time, it pulled no punches. The description of the Janai child and how they were treated is blow for blow how a lot of gay kids in America would be treated and still are treated in school. So again, that was a spot where they went for it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, they don't quite go as far as Matthew Shepard.
No.
Obviously.
no, yeah.
Because, I don't know why, actually. I don't know why. That would have raised the stakes, I think, a lot. But they did, but that was the decision they didn't make, and so basically they send him to psychotectic therapy treatment, conversion therapy. We know.
Yeah.
We know. And you're right. Going back to the props, I do give them props for even bringing that up.
Yeah.
And even bringing that up, because that was not something that anybody was engaging with, even though its existence was pretty widely known.
Yeah.
What prompted the writing of this episode in particular?
Oh, like I said, they had been getting just a deluge of letters about why, and comments about why TNG hadn't dealt with the gay problem, quote unquote.
I guess my question is,
and so Jerry Taylor picked it up.
I'll get to that. I guess what I'm wondering, I hear this episode referred to as the gay episode. Now, I know before 1990, pretty much the name LGBT wasn't even created yet. And a lot of things that were like outside of the realm of being straight or identifying or gender identifying the same sex you were born with, you were just called gay. And that's just the way it was, just gay. And so when I look at this, I guess I'm looking at it from a younger perspective where this doesn't seem, by definition, gay at all. Why is it called gay?
That's my point. And that's one of the reasons I really struggle with this episode, because they go out of their way to do a gay episode about something that's not gay.
Right.
And I mean, Eris is right. It is a metaphorical exploration of the topic.
Yes, it definitely is. And I can see where it becomes an issue where at the end of the day, you still have your male and your female, and then that's it. I see that's their goalpost. They're saying, yeah, this journey is a little bit different than humans but they're aliens, so that's the loophole. And with Star Trek, you can get away with a lot because it's aliens.
Yeah,
But
slap a weird forehead on somebody, and you're good to go.
yeah. But Frakes was spot on. If had been a male casted, which which says a lot about Frakes' character. I'll say that. Like if he was willing to kiss a male actor, then or a male identifying actor,
Mhm.
that says a lot about who he is as a person. And we all have always loved Jonathan Frakes. He spoke out against many different controversial TNG and even TOS episodes. So kudos to Jonathan Frakes for transcending um, and getting away from ignorance. You know, did any
Yeah.
other TNG cast members have anything to say about the Outcast?
That's a good question. I don't remember off the top of my head, mostly because that particular comment from Frakes has kind of stuck with me for years about this episode, because there was always something about it that didn't quite rub me the right way. Um, some of it, I think, had to do with just the assumptions the episode makes about gender. Because a lot of the conversation about what about what makes being male versus female, and trying to come up with a way to describe it. I think that was a real missed opportunity. Like all Riker can come up with is snips and snails and puppy dog tails.
The whole
What? And also, like, just as an aside, now I love me some split pea soup, but this is a white food.
the,
Like
the
nobody leads with this. Nobody effing leads with split pea soup. Is let me introduce you. Let me introduce you to human cuisine. Split pea soup, y'all. No.
no.
Again, I say this as somebody who loves the stuff and makes it in her Instant Pot far more often than I should possibly admit to, but also I'm Southern, so there you go.
The way they handled the episode took on gender in itself in universe just raises a lot of questions about the Janai, because they the way they discuss it, it's like they're not drawing a distinction between gender and biological sex at all.
No, absolutely
which-
not. There's no line drawn there at all.
Which just it makes you ask a lot of questions about wait. So obviously we know gender is different from sex, but the construct of gender still arose from sex and distinctions between the core sexes, so to speak. How would a species that doesn't have apparently different biological sexes come up with a concept of gender in the first place?
And that's where we get that kind of very strange, like this again, this is this whole xenophobia thing, right? That it gets back to this concept of the Janai thinking themselves superior because they've evolved past, and they call it gender, but that's not actually, the term is incorrect. It's sex. It's biological sex. Now, they may, as a result of not having biological sex, they may not have. Well, they do. They obviously do have concepts of gender, because otherwise, Soren
Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to have a prohibition against it, or people who feel gender.
Exactly. So there is that as a concept, and I sort of get Soren being curious about, I guess, the plumbing, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Is what she's trying to explore. And how that works, and how sex works, and all of that other stuff, which, fair enough. Like, if you're just fertilizing husks, that's a very different process.
Yes.
And I do like that this episode acknowledges that reproduction, sexual intercourse, can be very different between species.
Well, you know what? Okay. So, all right, I'm here. Okay. So,
did we just break, William? I think we may have.
Okay.
Where's your water?
I drunk it. Okay. Okay. It's like when I. Okay.
Deep breath. Deep breath.
Okay. Just please educate me or help me explore the topic, because this is one of the things that I'm trying to get, that I promise I will probably never get. How does a species who is sexless have a concept of gender? Like when and I'm trying to look at it with non-human eyes, because when I look at things here in our world, not just America, but in our world, when it comes to things in our gender, it's usually influenced by someone of the same gender you but feel like you identify with. But at the same time, it's also fluid, because even men used to wear high heels. So I don't get where and what and how.
And Pink was the
I
main
feel like
one.
Quark right now trying to get rejoined. Like I got, and I understand rejoined, being a homosexual myself, but I don't get, how does a sexless species, look at this. We have non-binaries and binaries. My mind is kind of blown right now. How do you have, I mean, I suppose you can be, there are platonic relationships out there, but knowing Riker, how do you have a sexually romantic relationship with someone, regardless of the gender, who is sexless? Unless they are transgender, which would by definition make said woman a trans woman. So if she's going to be a trans woman, does that mean that again, I'm thinking it with a narrow lens, and please educate me, does that mean that you can just go on the ship and just have the work done and have the desires that you want, like now that it's the 24th century? Like,
I am very confused.
They did that with Quark. They turned him into a woman for one episode and then brought him back, and then he held Dodo. Like
I'm very confused with what you're actually asking. Like, if you're asking if
how
they
are
have
they
a
doing
concept
this?
of
How?
who is the they? Is the
Eris, can you please help me?
This would be an to bring in one of my other big fandoms here. This would be an absolutely fascinating point to have Dr. Morden Salas from Mass Effect come in and explain how a human and a Janai can interact with each other, and it would probably involve a Morgan and Sullivan production as well. But
do you get what I'm trying to ask?
There's an image in my head. Thanks, Eris.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I
mean, honest to God, I suspect that the 24th century, they got replicators.
That's what I'm saying. They turn
Quark
into a woman. They turn Quark into a woman. You can literally look like any species you want, and you can have any sex you want. That's not an issue in the 24th century.
Except to the Janai.
Except to the Janai, which means you would have to claim asylum in order for that to get done. So.
Okay.
Is that the way that it has to get done? Is that the path that needs to be taken? It's very possible to change your sex. It's very possible.
So Soren when they're having their awkward, cringy conversations about sex organs, Soren says something about how fertilizing the fibrous sac or something can still be a very pleasurable and intimate action. So obviously this is broadcast TV Trek. They are not going to explain to us how this happens. But the implication I took is that the Janai have some kind of sexual organ that they can stimulate for each other or something in order to help them fertilize the sac.
Because
so
she doesn't
they're capable of experiencing sexual feeling. It's just
yeah. And credit where credit's due, I do like the fact that the episodes are very clear that she feels what is a pretty healthy sex drive, apparently. Mm-hmm. And unlike the other female characters in TNG, they don't mock her for it.
Right.
Which I think is pretty cool. And that may be because Jerry Taylor wrote the screenplay. I don't know. But I guess to answer your question about like what would they do? First off, it would be up to Soren what she wanted to have done, if anything. It's like even choosing not to have any kind of surgery or go on to HRT doesn't mean that you are no less trans for it.
right, right.
It's not required. It's kind of the
It's
point.
not right. So how? I guess between species, because species in general, regardless, will have the urge. At least for humans, I'm still thinking with humanism. I'm so sorry. Will have the urge to reproduce because we have to reproduce as a species, or we die. And whether in the I'm sorry, it's just whether it be and
Basic
there's many
biology.
different ways. There's many different ways to reproduce as humans that we've now learned. I have to, there's ways. So I guess knowing Riker and knowing Soren, how can that be done? Because Riker isn't just going to be platonic.
No, and that's very, very clear that it's not just going to be a platonic relationship. You know, I gotta tell you, I think if we're going to get down into the nitty gritty, I think they go to Beverly. Beverly takes some scans, makes some recommendations, programs the replicator, and then whatever they replicate is up to them.
This is
Because we've talked about what we're going to use the holodecks for, and how let's be real, people are not climbing the Matterhorn; they're having sex in the holodecks.
All right, Court.
again. I'm going to help myself a bit here. As a huge Mass Effect fan, I have probably put an unhealthy degree of thought into how species with completely different sets of genitals could still sexually pleasure each other. And I'm sure they could figure something out. Worst case scenario, the Janai have hands, so she could, and mouths, so I'm sure she could do something to get Riker to warp 9. And
Hey,
that's where you went, Eris.
Yeah, that's where I went. And we have no idea what Janai plumbing looks like. They do say at some point in time that they inseminate the husks. So maybe they have, I don't know, proboscises.
I was about to say it's a proboscis. My guess is it's a proboscis.
Presumably they have something, and perhaps all Janai have something like a dick or a penis that they use to inseminate their husks, and their fluids mix inside the husk and make a little Janai. In which case, go Riker for being willing to do whatever with Soren's whatever husk inseminator to
we get a lot of
a happy place.
Get a lot of whatever. And again, props to Riker for that, because that's kind of huge in 1992. Because the very, like, y'all are right. There's a one of the other missed opportunities of this particular show is that we don't talk about this. We don't give Riker the credit that he deserves for being willing to make it work.
Yeah.
And I think that says something. I'd like to think that says something about the 24th century more so than Riker.
Mm-hmm. I mean, because it's like, this is kind of like a what if slide in type thing, but what if
Manny's head just exploded in Abu Dhabi, by the way.
What if Riker learned from the experiences of having a Trillin of a symbiote inside him, and picked up on a lot, not just as far as lifetimes of information. Not saying he would retain all of them, but enough of it to know that that the symbionts are sexually fluid.
Wait, did we just say that Will had a worm-like thing inside of him, and it opened him up to the idea of new sexual experiences?
That's
is
what
that what we're actually saying here?
I really feel like this is mostly Riker. I don't feel like this is Odan.
I mean, because it's like, because I feel like the
mostly
symbionts
Riker.
I feel like the Trill and the symbionts are inherently bisexual and sexually fluid, and a lot of things.
I think I'm really good at Pan with the Trill.
Yeah, I would go with that.
I can't even narrow it, like, because it's like when you just have, so what if Riker got some of that, because he, because he certainly, we can say with certainty that he never ever looked at another identifying male ever, like
Is that because because the character of Riker wouldn't have done that, or because in late 80s, early 90s television wouldn't let him?
I'm going with the latter.
I am too.
I think that if you were redoing the character in the Next Generation now, you could.
Man, tap dances on the edge of himbo in a lot of ways.
And this is one of the things that, understandably, it's broadcast television. They couldn't go there. But one of the big missed opportunities of Star Trek is the presumption that most humanoid species have compatible bits, instead of giving us the wonderful world of, hey, our bits don't mesh together like they do within the same species. What can we do to still maintain a relationship here?
Again, guys, they have replicators. I'm not letting this go. Somebody, that Quark has a whole category and catalog of things he can replicate for you.
I hope that we do the episode where Quark is a woman.
I mean, we absolutely are.
I hope so.
We absolutely are. I think the next thing we're going to do as part of this series is we're going to hit the stigma, which is how 2000's Enterprise addresses the same allegorical exploration.
Okay, cool.
I have a plan, y'all. I do.
I believe it. I just follow it. Like, I just follow it. Like this is like, oh, LGBT's your show. No, it's me and Marie's show.
And half the time Jermaine forgets you.
Let's make that clear. Like, she has FTP, I have Black Trek, we have LGBTrek. Okay, let's get the pronouns right when it comes to LGBTrek. Yeah.
I do. I wish this had. I really wish this had been better written in so many different ways. Like, I wish we could have skipped the whole first 10 minutes, the awkward sex conversation. I really wish we could have skipped Sexless Worf, though.
that just felt very unnecessary. He didn't even give us, I kept waiting for them to try and salvage it with him saying something like, in Klingon culture, where we could use the backwards ass Klingons as his excuse for this, but he doesn't even go there.
No, I mean, he's literally like, the Janai freak me out because they don't have gender and that offends the order of his Klingon world. And then also, like, wild cards are a woman's game because they're weak. And then he's sitting there like, but then I've got to figure out what I actually have in my hand and what you might have in your hand. It's actually a much more complicated game.
Troy and Crusher both drag him for this. Or
They
Data
do.
look very confused.
And Data makes a perfect, I gotta say, Data makes a perfect straight man, because it comes up with, the entire point of that conversation is for Worf to make this statement that a human in a Janai would be disgusting or impossible, and Data just point blank go, why? And you can't ignore, anybody else, you could possibly walk away and be like, you're just trolling me. But Data's not trolling.
He's Data. His
and
name is Data.
And that means Data deserves an answer, and Worf doesn't have one to give him.
No.
And I loved that sequence. The bones of this episode are so good, but there are just so many things that they didn't quite get.
Yeah.
I gotta say, rewatching this episode, I was just like, it's a bunch of straight people trying to talk about an experience they've never had.
Right. Just
I know, my inner, the William that lives inside my head was just losing his mind during the entirety of this episode, because I was just like, it's the whole conversation about gender, the whole conversation about sex, the whole conversation about identity. It's very obvious that no one on that show, or at least no one in the writer's room, had the first freaking clue what that's actually like.
Yeah, no. I mean, this scene, this was almost even worse than the pronoun conversation. In the 24th century, Dr. Crusher sitting here explaining men are from Mars, women are from Venus. with men don't wear makeup or mascara or color their nails.
Which is ridiculous because I know men who do both and all of it.
Now, Crusher, she knows better. She knows better.
Absolutely.
But I get what they were trying to do, and that face says it all. It says it all. Like,
I
you can
mean,
make a meme out
to
of
be
that.
fair,
Face.
yeah, like Gates McFadden, there's very much a frustrated Gates McFadden behind Dr. Crusher in this sequence. Like there really is. It's kind of the same sense you get like off of Michael Dorn and LeVar Burton in Code of Honor. Like there's so much eye rolling here because everything seems to come back. Like all of these gender conversations come back to, well, women are physically weaker and don't do as much and have to paint themselves and yeah. but they're not they're not different. Like they're not unequal partners, and it's just like
in terms of Worf, he's always kind of been like that in terms of women in general. Like,
absolutely. I'm not arguing Worf because Worf's been kind of an asshole like throughout this entire
and knew he was an asshole.
Yeah, like I mean, Worf's A+ parenting deserves its own story arc on one of these shows. I just haven't figured out which one we're going to stick it in.
Probably Comrades.
Oh, I'm going to have to talk to Jermaine.
Yeah, about the relationship dynamic between he and Alexander, and then later on adding Jadzia, and then Jadzia being challenged by a Klingon woman just to enter the House of Martok. Like,
there's so much to talk about with Worf, and that's a good call. I will have to talk to Jermaine about that because I really do want to do like an entire sequence on parenting and A+ parenting because
you can speak because you have 2 boys.
I do, and I spent a lot of time really worried that I am going to pass on some of these same ideas, right? These same sort of assumptions that just underlie all of the dialogue in this show, like this episode. There's so many assumptions about how women work, how men work, how gender works, how sexual attraction works, and none of it's accurate. None of it.
I don't envy you with struggling with that.
And I do. I'm terrified a little bit. My husband and I ended up having a conversation about because I paint my nails, right? Because it's pretty colors and makes me happy.
Right.
And the boys are like, we want purple sparkly toes too. And I'm like, okay. And Robert's like, eh. And I'm like, but okay. Like if they want purple sparkly toes, what's it hurt? It's like the whole conversation about how kids, like boys aren't supposed to wear skirts to school. Why not?
Yeah.
It's just fabric.
Now I can definitely contribute to that aspect of the conversation because I'm told that I'm perceived as a masculine homosexual man. Oh, okay. I guess. Thank you. But since moving to Little Rock, I decided to grow my nails out. And every time I
look at those, I'm like, how do you type? Because I can't even function.
I actually like the way it sounds when I type. But it's
seriously, I would hit like 4 keys.
I like growing them out. I want to paint them like a dark gray color or something, and I want to wear eyeliner.
My dude, let me introduce you to OPI, and you will never look back.
Okay, but yeah, and I've recently learned that fingernails don't grow as aesthetically pleasing as one would like them, which is why people go and get their nails done and they get stuff put on top of it. A lot of people ask if my nails were real, and I say, yeah, why wouldn't they be? Well, it didn't occur to me that other people's nails do not grow out the same way. I didn't even know my nails were that good looking, but every time I'm at work and they see my fingernails, they're like, and they're like, what did you do? I said, I let it grow out for a month. Like,
I can't do that. I can't.
Yeah. And then other people from my hometown who will remain nameless will say, William, I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't really like or get seeing you with long nails. And I said, all right, here's the backstory. My mom's hands look almost exactly like mine. She played piano so beautifully, so well. Her anniversary for her passing is coming up in a couple of days. And my hands are the closest thing that I have to remembering my mom's. Now that's a personal decision. And then as soon as I say all that, they're like, well, grow them out, baby. We'll grow them out. And I'm like, no, 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 no. Why did you feel so entitled to bring that up to me in the first place? Now that I gave you a reason that I shouldn't have had to give you at all.
Right. First off, it's not
Right.
it's not anybody's beeswax, as it were.
Right.
But all right. I mean, well, way to make us all sad.
I mean, no, I mean, yeah, I'm happy my mom's in a better place. But it's like in that terms of when we're talking about aesthetics and makeup and stuff like that, I can definitely jump in on that because that's something I want to explore in terms of having eyeliner and getting my nails done. And I'm already working on skincare routines and all that. So I don't know. I don't know. Like, what does William want? Let's explore that in another LGBT episode.
And yeah, I think that's kind of an interesting question. Because Aries and I have had a similar conversation about this
Right.
at one point, like about what, and you probably remember this, about how you don't have to wear frilly dresses and makeup and blah 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 to be female. Like, you are
Right.
female. That is who you are. That you are completely valid in any point. But you said
That I really want to, because I enjoy the aesthetic.
Which
Right.
is one thing. But the other thing you told me is there was a certain external validation that
Yes.
wrapped into that as well.
Mm.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And this is something that throughout my coming out, my transition, that I've definitely struggled with as someone who was a feminist way before I came out and discovered my own what I am.
Your own femininity, as it were.
Right.
Exactly. The I feel bad in a way sometimes about the desires I have to fit a conventionally attractive female aesthetic when
I'm gonna need you to tell your story about laser treatment.
oh my fucking god. So which is works because I actually just even had another laser session today, and not today, not this week. And
I was about to say, you look remarkably good for having done that to
Yeah.
yourself.
it's
I'm gonna have to find out your foundation because mine wouldn't cover that nonsense.
Laser facial hair removal is, well, I call it getting face fucked by lightsabers, because that's what it feels like. It is repeated burning, stabbing pain across your skin, all for the sake of a look. And that, by no way, shape, and form do I believe that trans women should ever be asked to prove their commitment to being perceived as women. If that was a thing we were going to do, sitting through a laser facial hair removal session would 100% constitute it. Because that is pain.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think the Outcast does sort of really does kind of sort of play around with these concepts of what are the things that we're doing, like how are these societal gender markers telling a story, but it doesn't quite go far enough.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't quite go far enough because, like, I mean, Dr. Crusher could just as easily have said, it's fun, it's nice, I like doing it, and that would be a completely valid and fair response, just like Eris says, right? Like, I mean, you're like, I like the makeup, it's great.
Versus saying this is what women do.
Right. Versus saying this is what women do.
This would even have been a great opportunity for her to have said, well, historically, it was very gender differentiated.
Oh,
But
yeah.
in the 24th century, we don't necessarily do that anymore. And either sex is free to stylize themselves how they feel like.
I mean, that's the other thing that I find really shocking going through all of Trek is just the sheer lack of body modifications.
Yeah.
There are no tattoos.
Original series gets a big pass because they didn't have the budget.
They didn't have the budget, and also the 60s.
Yeah.
TNG gets a little bit of a pass for the same reason. But there's nothing that says, I mean, Disco can't do it, but they don't.
They've done a little. I mean, I do give them Disco credit for touching on cybernetics at least a little bit.
Yeah, but I mean, where are the tattoos? You cannot tell me that tattoos don't have a place in this whole narrative.
Oh, but Marie, don't you remember Chakotay and his very significant facial tattoo?
Chakotay. Ah! She took her glasses off. I had a bitch over here. She took her glasses off. She threw them off. She threw them off.
So I really, really, really hate the Chakotay thing. I do.
Even Q mocked him about it. Mine is bigger, not big enough.
Yeah. So, because their facial tattoos are a pretty significant portion in a lot of indigenous, like, elements of a lot of indigenous cultures. Like, y'all have seen Miss Chasing Horse. She's a supermodel, and she has traditional facial tattoos. We're starting to see a lot more of it in New Zealand with the Maori culture. Those people are reclaiming their tattoo history. So yeah, it just feels so terrible that gets cheapened by Chakotay.
Yes.
And I can't even appreciate just how terrible that is, right? Because I'm not indigenous, but it's still kind of frustrating. But not every modification has to have a spiritual significance.
Oh no, of course not.
But apparently in Trek it does, unless it's women who are authorized 2 holes in their ears. You're allowed to wear 2 small earrings. Unless you're Uhura, in which case you're allowed to wear 2 large earrings.
Wasn't there a... Am I just imagining this, or was there an episode of Deep Space Nine where someone had a cybernetic head jack and could directly connect their brain to computers, and they did a spiel about how that was dangerous and the Federation had banned that within its territory or something? I might just be imagining this, or it might have been from a novel.
I mean, I feel like that's an Altered Carbon thing, but maybe that's not something that I actively remember. The closest I can remember is the Vedic Burial situation.
Yeah. But yeah, no, you're definitely absolutely right that Star Trek in general just has historically not explored body modification either for aesthetic or functional reasons nearly to the extent that it could have.
Right.
And
you can't tell me that humanity has outgrown the urge to decorate itself.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, it was even until the second or third season of Discovery, Star Trek didn't really even acknowledge that robots existed. So
there's that, and also, I mean, and I will give credit to Discovery. Discovery is the first Star Trek iteration that allows Black women to have actual hair representation. So yeah. Good on. But we do need to kind of move a little bit further from that. I mean, you can't. I mean, there's no reason. Like, if you literally have a dude with a giant fish head on your bridge, like having somebody with facial tattoos, which shouldn't even blink an eye.
No,
like, you shouldn't.
No.
Yeah.
You've got former Borg walking around with some of their gadgetry still installed.
Hey,
why would
there it is?
Why which the spin-off that ended up not really going anywhere, Renegades, at least went there with that and had a former Borg crew member who still had a lot of their Borg equipment in it. In the movie or whatever it was they made, it actually was fairly important.
I think you meant Echep, right?
I do not remember character names at all. Sorry.
So did they stop after episode 2 of Renegades?
Well, actually, that's a good question. I don't know that they did.
Because I saw the first one, and then in the second one, they changed all the wording after the whole, what's it called? The whole, starts with an A. Axonar thing happened.
Oh, right.
That was a thing. It's a thing.
Man, I'm still feeling salty about it. Let me close this show out before I go on another rant.
And also before Marie passes out, like I think that's a really
biggest thing because we're also gonna put on our T-shirt that Marie is going to turn into a pumpkin.
Yeah, so, Marie is going to turn into a pumpkin. Like she's already slurring her words. It's not good.
She hasn't even had any bourbon tonight.
No, that should tell you about where.
That's a big thing. Like,
that should tell you about where I am, guys.
Right.
It's been a long weekend.
All right, this has been a very good LGBTrek episode for discussing the Outcast. I personally have learned a lot in terms of different perspectives and knowing what things to call, and listening to how that there's when it comes to things that I kind of don't get, like what's wrong. I really listen to Marie. I'm just like, okay, tell me what's wrong. All right, cool. I'm here for it. Why? And then she explains it. Eris, you've given me a lot of explanation as well. Thank you very much. And yeah, what's our next episode going to be, Marie?
Like I said, we are going to tackle Enterprise's The Stigma, which is another metaphorical explanation of LGBTQ representation.
Nice. All right.
I mean, it is Enterprise. How nice can it really be?
I'm letting that go. I'm letting that go. I'm letting that. You know what, Marie? You and me, opposite treks. We're debating this one out. You and me. I am sick and tired of everyone talking shit about Enterprise. Leave.
You know, we just do. We know to pull your string, right? Like you're like a Cupid doll.
I will give you this. I like Enterprise more than I like Voyager.
Fair.
We're gonna have a whole conversation. This is gonna be a party, guys.
I am ready. You know what? Bye. I just want to talk to her. No, I just want to talk to her. Like I heard, like what I think Robin said. I think she wanted to pull her hands back.
She wanted to do a bitch.
No, she wanted to.
Bitch.
So if you can't tell, they have thoughts about Discovery.
Look, here's the thing. Cancel culture might get everyone else, but they won't come for me in this subject. If you are our allies, we are not talking to you. We are not talking to you. This does not... Pop. Okay, we're not talking to you. Stop trying to take our shit and make it your goddamn business. It ain't got nothing to do with you. Did I say that? No. I said Atlas and Cardassian. If you are neither in that category, go to another show.